This morning I got up and got some different guidance to go and talk about the last judgment. So it kind of goes in along with what you were talking about apparently last week with the idea there is no death. So there's a few sections in here that address that, and well, let's just go and do them and have our discussions along the way. So we'll start out with this from the early part of the book and then finish up toward the end of the book and see how it's expanded upon the idea. So if we want to start with text on page 33. So we'll go to the text on page 33.
Oh, okay. I have reversed here. Thank you.
There it is.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So this section is not long. We'll read this section called The Meaning of the Last Judgment. And since we'll have most of the time here, we'll be able to stop after each paragraph and ask if there are any questions on it instead of reading through and then going back and talking. So Patty, would you like to start?
Okay. The meaning of the last judgment. One of the ways in which you can correct the magic miracle conclusion is to remember that you did not create yourself. You are apt to forget this when you become egocentric, and this puts you in a position where a belief in magic is virtually inevitable. Your will to create was given you by your Creator, who was expressing the same will in his creation. Since creative ability rests in the mind, everything you create is necessarily a matter of will. It also follows that whatever you alone make is real in your own sight, though not in the mind of God. This basic distinction leads directly into the real meaning of the last judgment.
Any thoughts on that paragraph? Jim?
Yeah. Well, when it was being read, there's the line at the top of page 34, and starting with the second line down. Since creative ability rests in the mind, everything you create is necessarily a matter of will. And I mean, I really understand that, but I don't think it's common knowledge that, I mean, if we look about the world, we will see people who want to blame someone else for something. And if they could read this, I wonder if they would realize that it started in their mind.
Well, there's the distinction here that everything you create is a matter of will. And I guess you could say everything that is illusion is a matter of will as well. But there is a distinction between what we create and what we make that isn't saved, which is the illusion. And that's, I think the best way to explain that is just to read Principle 50 on page 6.
Making a distinction between create and make as well. Create meaning one thing.
That's what I'm
and make
doing.
Meaning the illusion.
Right. Mm-hmm. Jim, would you like to read that out loud? 50?
Sure. The miracle compares what you have made with creation, accepting what is in accord with it as true and rejecting what is out of accord as false.
So this goes along with the idea that every loving thought that we have about anyone or anyone has about us is saved and nothing else is. Or we can go later into this and it talks about everything in your illusion is gone out of your memory. Everything, all of it, completely. And the way I interpret that is that it is a process while we think there are levels. When we get to knowledge, as it talks about it, there are no levels. There is only love. And everything, the way I look at it, is all the levels from thoughts of separation have been answered by resurrection or thoughts of oneness or bringing back. Like the prodigal journey's over. And when the prodigal journey's over, it's completion, what the Course calls completion. There's a paragraph in the introduction to part 2 of the workbook, and that's one I memorized so that I could use it before every lesson in the second half of the workbook, or part 2. And now that I've said it, I probably won't be able to do it, but I'll give it a shot here. It says, "Now is the time for practice almost done, for in this final section we will come to understand that we need only call to God and all temptations disappear. Instead of words, we need but call His name. Instead of words, we need but feel His love. Instead of prayers, we need but call His name. Instead of judging, we need but be still and let all things be healed. We will accept the way God's plan will end as we received the way it started. Now it is complete. This year has brought us to eternity." So it's that position that I think we're moving to. So if we want to keep in mind that if there appears to be any conflict between early parts of the text and later parts, such as every loving thought is saved, and then contrast that with none of it is remembered. Remember, it's a process. The way I look at it is that when none of it is remembered versus all the loving thoughts are saved, it is that even our loving thoughts that we know we have because we feel the love are not put together in proper perspective yet. They're not part of the totality that we will feel as we know our oneness with God. So in that sense, the love is saved, but the specifics of the experience are rearranged to the point that we no longer need it in that form.
In a sense, are you saying they're no longer necessary? Because if you get the message, you don't need the words,
I think so. I think it's that you get the essence of it. The importance of it is the feeling of love itself.
Yeah. And then words just don't mean much at that
Well, and what words do is they bring you back to an experience within the illusion of which only the loving feeling was real in the first place. And you don't need to be sucked back into them.
Yeah, thanks.
Maybe you could say it's put into the context of the wholeness.
Exactly, Sam. I think that's it.
I think what this principle number 50 is saying, what I heard it saying is, we're using what we made to prove that all of this is real. We're using the illusion to prove that the illusion is real.
I think what we're doing is we're believing something in our mind that we want to be real, and we're making it reflect back to us. We're making it so it proves it to ourselves. And this is the only way we can convince ourselves that my world is the only world, and I did create myself in my world, because I've gone through all these experiences to integrate and improve my character and build my memory bank and all of this stuff So in that sense, I must have created myself. And I think we're being asked to understand that from the standpoint of the oneness that exists outside of my tiny little grain of sand world, all I made was an illusion.
Nothing matters.
Pardon?
Nothing matters.
Nothing but love exists. That's real.
So, okay, we'll go to paragraph 2 here.
The last judgment is one of the most threatening ideas in your thinking. This is because you do not understand it. Judgment is not an attribute of God. It was brought into being only after the separation, when it became one of the many learning devices to be built into the overall plan. Just as the separation occurred over millions of years, the last judgment will extend over a similarly long period, and perhaps an even longer one. Its length can, however, be greatly shortened by miracles, the device for shortening but not abolishing time. If a sufficient number become truly miracle-minded, this shortening process can be virtually immeasurable. It is essential, however, that you free yourself from fear quickly, because you must emerge from the conflict if you are to bring peace to other minds.
So here we are at the beginning again. Judgment is not an attribute of God. It was brought into being only after the separation, when it became one of the many learning devices to be built into the overall plan. One of the many learning devices to be built into the overall plan. Now, if you recall a line from what I just recalled from my memory about part 2 of the workbook, it is now, is the need for practice almost done, because this final section will bring us to the understanding that we need only to call to God. Well, toward the end of that thing is, now we will accept God's plan as we received it. No, we will accept the way God's plan will end as we accepted, as we received it at the beginning. So this whole thing is a plan. Now, how can it be a plan when I have free will? How do those things coincide? That's an oxymoron. The only way I can grasp that is the oneness of everything, and completion being, for every thought of separation that I have, in time, it has been resolved within eternity. So it doesn't matter how I use my free will to do something that seems to be diverging from the Holy Spirit's plan for us, we might say. Because that's already been done. Eternity is outside of time. And the answer to that has already been given. And it's already been accepted, received, and done. So I'm replaying something as if I have a free will, and I do, within this thing called time. If we go back to what we talked about, that time is circular. It wraps around on itself, because everything that could be done experientially in time has been done experientially in time. And the answer is always there. So what we're moving through is this idea of time. Now, it's really interesting. There have been a few changes in this paragraph, and I'm not reading them to all how they were written originally, because if they don't make a significant difference. But one sentence does. When it says here, just as a separation occurred over millions of years, the last judgment will extend over a similarly long period, and perhaps an even longer one. That's depressing until you read the idea that it can be shortened to be virtually immeasurable. But after that sentence, and perhaps an even longer one, what is deleted is the sentence, its length depends, however, on the effectiveness of the present speed up. And that was left out. There's 2 other places in the original text, and Jamie, you might remember this, where it talks about the cosmic speed up, because
Right.
you use that original text in your, right. Okay. So that one is one that you might keep in mind.
Well, I think something that supports and adds some clarity to this is what we're told in the very beginning. That free will does not mean that you can elect what to take. It just means you elect what to take at a given time. You can't decide the curriculum for yourself. And that makes free will really clear to me. Right in the beginning, before we even start the lessons or anything, Jesus says that we can't. So we don't have any free will over the curriculum, and we're all here to live through a curriculum, period. And the curriculum is the Course in Miracles in all its variant forms around the world in different, supposedly different paths or whatever, different languages and so forth. But it's all the same curriculum pretty much. And so that when you're talking about that, it seems initially conflicting. Well, how can it be a plan if I have a free will? But it says right there, that's the plan. It's the curriculum, and you don't have free will to decide what the plan's going to be.
Well,
It's just, and the speeding up is when we decide to get on board.
Yeah.
We decide to really get on board and go, okay, now our will is helping. Now to align the will with the will that's in the plan.
The last sentence here is saying what you're saying. It says, it is essential, however, that you free yourself from fear quickly.
Yeah.
Because you must emerge from the conflict if you are to bring peace to other minds. And to me that's really important, because do you ever wonder why we're here? I mean, sometimes I do. And it tells me now why I'm here. To bring peace to other minds. That's all of us. That's why we're here. To bring peace to other minds. So it's like my kids have never read the Course in Miracles, but it's amazing how they can almost teach me from what they learned subliminally from Sally and I.
Yeah. that we are all bringing peace to other minds by going through our own prodigal journeys.
Yep.
As the mind is one. I look at it as, I liken it in physicality to brain cells or something. And each cell would have synapses to all the other cells. And each one is sending that out. Where we think the brain cell is just, one individual thing. Where we're all of our minds are cells within the mind that all bring this divergence, this curriculum of the prodigal journey that we each seem to operate within, and our free will allows us to play in the timelines almost indefinitely, but not totally indefinitely, because otherwise death would be real and we would be able to not return.
I'm wondering if the judgment and correction are actually the same thing.
I'm sorry? Say that one
I'm
more
wondering
time.
if the term that's used in your correction is the same thing, actually, as judgment.
Correction.
Because if judgment is going to play out over some period of time, at least.
I guess if there were a distinction, it might be that judgment is deciding whether we are on the Holy Spirit's path or our ego's path. And the correction would be to make plain to us the Holy Spirit's path. And then we would still have that free will to delay or to choose that path.
Yeah.
Does anybody else see judgment as an attack the way I do?
Yeah, we're not talking about that type of judgment,
Yes.
this one, we're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine. Look, I'm talking about the last judgment, of course.
We're
I think
talking
that's
about
what
the
it
I'm
means,
talking about the
though.
last-
I
I'm
think
sorry.
that's what it is,
Didn't
that
make
the
that
last
clear.
judgment means it's
We're
gone.
reading about the last
Does not
judgment. I
exist
just-
anymore.
Talking about it in that context, yeah.
It's not personal judgments
No,
anymore.
the last
We're
judgment,
talking
because
about the
it's
last.
playing out.
I think we
It's
could
a
say
correction
our
process.
judgment could be construed as an attack simply because we do not come from a place of wholeness. So it could be construed as an attack on other people's wholeness. But what it's talking about here is the judgment of discerning between truth and illusion, between the path of the Holy Spirit and the path of the ego.
Well, when I experienced a judgment, here I've been going along so peaceful and wonderful, and then all of a sudden a judgment will come up, and wow, it hit me hard.
There went peace.
Yeah, it really did. And then everything that I read for the next week was all about love and how I had judged and it brought me back to choosing the Holy Spirit, or choosing the God self within me and seeing what had happened. Everything that I read, I thought, geez, I read this how many years? I've been reading this how many years? And then this experience came. And so I have worked through this. Now, how many times we have to work through this? But I have felt peaceful all week and, since this experience.
And that seems to be why we're here, is for this experience. And it's the idea
So that it'll all go away.
Well, it's the idea of,
No more.
can we have free will to not be one with God?
Yeah.
And then what it becomes, the answer would be, I think, ultimately no. But the answer would also be, but you can think you can, and it's called a dream.
You can imagine
That's
it.
it. The
You
dream.
can imagine it, but it's not real.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Well, one thing, what's been happening to me more and more recently is, on this question of worldly judgment,
Yeah.
is I'm finding that, for one reason or another, I'm making some kind of a mental judgment about something, quite often political. And concurrently, what's going on in my mind is a correction that, hey, wait a minute, that's false reasoning. It's a false thing that they're happening together. It's really strange. I'm thinking, well, why don't I just stop then? Why don't I just stop the judgment? Well, it wants to go on. It wants to finish itself.
You know what I'm hearing in that, Sam, is I'm hearing just simply two aspects of the split mind. But the split mind, for most of us in the past, it has been, you have the ego thought, you follow the ego's guidance, you make the mistake, it hurts, there's a long time period, and you find finally out there must be a better way, then you hear that other voice. What it sounds like it's happening, you've got them real close together now.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are.
So you don't have to go through all that
You don't have
time
to go
lag and
through
all
that.
that agony and everything else.
Yeah.
Now I have to learn to stop. Hey, cut that out.
Yeah.
That's just false. It's false
Yeah.
reasoning.
To catch
You
it
don't
in
have
that
to do that,
moment.
yeah.
That's what I want.
Yeah,
Catch it in
yeah.
that moment.
Exactly right. That's right.
Jamie, I'm sorry.
It seems like some of this is in the next
Paragraph.
paragraph.
That's why I was gonna ask Jamie.
Yeah.
Funny how that works.
It's funny how that works.
Go.
We're on four?
Number 3.
Three. The last judgment is generally thought of as a procedure undertaken by God. Actually, it will be undertaken by my brothers with my help. It is the final healing rather than a meting out of punishment, however much you think the punishment is deserved. Punishment is a concept totally opposed to right-mindedness, and the aim of the last judgment is to restore right-mindedness to you. The last judgment might be called a process of right evaluation. It simply means that everyone will finally come to understand what is worthy and what is not. After this, the ability to choose can be directed rationally. Until this distinction is made, however, the vacillations between free and imperfect will cannot but continue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of a description of my dilemma. Isn't it?
I want it now.
And this is the idea of the word discernment instead of judgment.
Yeah.
Discernment between truth and illusion, which boils down basically to discernment between what voice am I listening to right now.
I'm sorry, turn this way and say it again. I didn't hear you.
It boils down to
Right on.
discernment between what voice am I listening to right now.
Absolutely.
Well,
And in my case, I'm listening to both voices at the same time.
And so you had to make
And
a
then
choice.
Yeah.
But if I become aware
Yeah.
that I don't like what I'm feeling right now, then I know who I am looking at. I'm looking at the ego.
I
That's
can tell a lot by that.
That's
Yeah,
it, and
that'd
that's
be
what
great.
I'm remembering now. If I'm
In the
not
book.
having joy and love, and then okay, then
I
my
have
ego.
another thought. I think what is compelling inside of me is I've written a script and I want to finish it.
That's true, isn't it?
There's a lot of truth to
Yeah.
that.
It's the script.
Yeah.
It's a good script.
You got the,
Well,
you got the story going
The
in.
best you can say for it is interesting.
Well, if you think
Yeah.
about it, if there isn't some positive resolution, then you spent all those years on a meaningless script. So you, at least if we want a positive resolution to our scripts here in the body, in what we're doing. Isn't that basically what keeps people hanging on to life when there must be something more to it? It's like the movie, with Jack Nicholson. What was it called? As Good as It Gets, or is this
Yeah.
As Good as It Gets, or something like
Yeah,
that?
that's it.
Well, no, it isn't. It can't be. There's got to be something better.
I think Teddy brought up something important. In the book, Jesus, My Autobiography, he says that all of us have a built-in emotional guidance system. And when we're feeling bad or low or sad or whatever, it's telling us that we're going down the wrong path. And then when we're feeling good, it's telling us we're on the right.
Yeah.
Or you might say heading in the right direction, probably be a better way.
So we could say happiness is heavenly.
Yeah.
But that's something that most people don't ever do. They go with the ego and they don't think, oh, wait, Holy Spirit.
Well, if you start feeling bad and then you start thinking about how bad you're feeling, you feel worse.
Well, of course, the book was perfect when I started reading it, and it was telling me that I need to say what kind of day I want. And so the next day, after reading all this, I said, I want joy and love in my life. I had the most wonderful day. Sharing and people sharing with me, and there was just so much love and interplay. It was so beautiful. And so every day now I'm remembering to do that. I've read this for 20 years. But I would forget to wake up and say, what kind of day do I want? I want a peaceful, beautiful day with everybody that I'm in contact with.
So then the question comes in for all of us then, okay, I totally get you there. So now some shit hits the fan. Now what? Is joy and love and peace still there? That's what I
Well,
feel
the
the
shit
course.
hit the
That's
fan-
what I feel the course is talking
When the shit
to.
hit the
It's
fan
like,
the
are
other
we
day, I
still-
lost a tooth, a filling in my tooth.
Well, you hear what I'm saying though? It's like,
But I kept going with it.
is peace there? Is
Yeah.
peace still there? That's the real
That's
gift.
it.
Yeah.
And it was still there.
It's not so much that the day goes perfect with all our elements, but are we still present?
It's still
You know?
just within chaos.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
It's
dentist
still
called
present.
and I got my tooth fixed and everything. I mean, I just went right along with, okay, accepting and
There
being-
you are.
There-
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
The big word to
That's
me
the-
in my life lately
that's
has
the
been
practice.
acceptance or accepting. If I can accept what's going on, it gets better. And when I get uptight about it, it doesn't get better. It goes the other direction.
Well-
I hear you saying whatever comes up, love that.
Yes,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's a great way of saying it.
And,
Yeah.
where was I going to go?
Well, and acceptance, it sounds like very much. Like
But I'm so
accepting-
grateful.
Acceptance and love all at once.
I am
you
so
know?
grateful for the experience
Yeah.
that made me really look at it and say, I don't want this anymore. You know?
Is that the one you shared last time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like if you say, I mean, it's all coming from in here to out here. It's not like something's out here just happening and it's beyond your control. You're controlling what goes on out here. So if you say you want love, you want peace, you want kindness, then you're going to see that. You're not
Yeah,
going
I
to see
set
it.
my intention.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
'Cause it doesn't come from out
No.
here. It comes from in here.
Right.
One other factor you might want to think about in that wondering why you've been reading this for 20 years and you didn't decide what kind of day I want. I want a beautiful day. Is that at some point along the way, for us to ask for the kind of day we want, we have to believe we actually deserve that kind of day, that we're worthy of that kind of day, and that our reality is going to be reflected in that. And I think that you can do that now reflects how for 20 years you've been removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. So now you remember because you're worthy to have what you ask for.
Thank you.
It seems to me that
And Jesus says, or God said, I mean, it's gentle the way this is done. And it has been gentle. You know, all the awareness comes a little bit more, a little bit more. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
when the Course says love is letting go of fear, it takes on a whole new meaning when you begin to see what. In other words, I think now of fear as a magnet that draws whatever I fear to me. So I'm real careful with fear. I try to avoid it because as I look around and and I talk to people, it seems like whatever they fear is being pulled to them. I guess it's a learning experience. It's a teaching experience, but it's not always pleasant.
I think part of it, Jim, is that this helps us with is to recognize what fear is that we never thought was fear before. How much of our lives we lived in fear all along, but never identified it as fear. It's just, that's just the way it is in this world. And now it's clear that it's either love or fear, and we can make that distinction or that discernment.
Someone sent me this, I think goes along with this. It says, you are holding a cup of coffee when someone comes along and bumps into you, making you spill your coffee everywhere. Why did you spill your coffee? You spilled the coffee because there was coffee in your cup. Had there been tea in the cup, you would have spilled tea. The point is, whatever's inside the cup is what will spill out. Therefore, when life comes along and shakes you, which will happen, whatever is inside you will come out. It's easy to fake it until you get rattled. So we have to ask ourselves, what's in my cup? When life gets tough, what spills out? Joy, gratefulness, peace, and humility? Or does anger, bitterness, harsh words, and reactions come out? You choose. Today, let's work towards filling our cups with gratitude, forgiveness, joy, words of affirmation, kindness, gentleness, and love for others. But that's it.
Yeah.
It's either love or fear. But until we get bumped, we don't know sometimes,
I think one of the problems I have with that is that if I'm not careful, I'm going to go to my illusion to determine what love and fear are.
Yeah.
And that I'm going to say that, I'm supposed to be loving in this situation.
Well, that's why they say it's easy to, fake it.
Well, I think that it still boils down to what I'm connected to that comes through me. And if we're not careful, we're going to be judging something that comes through us that seems to be not loving and actually is in the moment. A good example for me, and it's been, how things come in threes, or did you get the lesson now? Did you get the lesson now? Type of thing. Well, here, let's try it again. When we were on our trip, I was turning left, and there were 2 left turn lanes. And I was right at the light when it changed, and there was a woman right next to me. And I don't know why I used that word. Could have been, let's just say, a driver.
Oh.
No mistakes.
I just changed judgment to discernment. And the light changed, and I'm turning around in my lane wide. She's cutting across right into my lane and driving me off of the road. And I hit the horn as a reaction. Well, nice people don't blow horns at people. Well,
Oh, yeah, they do.
sometimes you do.
Yeah, they do.
And then just driving back from the condo today, I'm making a turn into the right lane, and there's a merging coming on up on what is the hill up there that anyway, off of Nelson Road on there, and there's a big white line, and then I'm waiting to turn right on the exit. Well, there's an entrance coming right on, a big white line. I've got my blinker on to turn. I don't turn across that white line. There's kind of merging traffic, and this car is behind me, and it shoots up while I got my blinker on, and I almost hit it. It just shot right up as if, but it went kind of across the white line almost into me, like it was going to merge it. Well, there's a second one. Then I'm coming back.
Did you blow your horn? Did you blow your horn?
I did.
Oh, right on!
I
Okay.
did. Because I'm thinking, I'm not thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, it just happened. And I not only blew my horn, but then in the mirror went.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
So then I'm at another light on the way home, and there's a car parked in front of me, and I know the light's a short one for the green, and it's sitting there, and the guy's head's down, and it's sitting there, and it's like 5 seconds, and I'm looking in my mirror, and if it had just been me, that'd be one thing. There's like 8 cars behind me, so I hit the horn again, and I'm thinking, you know what? Now you can use all these examples about what's loving and what isn't, and on spilling your tea or spilling your coffee. But sometimes is it kind? The Course uses the idea of you don't let your children play with sharp objects.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're the children. So there is correction that if we're not careful, we're going to just come from our ego saying, well, that wasn't kind. Believing we understand all aspects of the situation and not realizing that was a judgment. And we didn't maybe ask and send it down.
Maybe you're
That's
just
the
on the
key.
quest to make
That's the
everybody a
key
better
right there.
driver.
That's what I try to do.
That's the key right there, though, is the guidance.
It
Always
is.
turning,
It
always
is.
turning.
But that's
Turning
what
for
Sam was
guidance,
saying.
or then
with-
afterwards taking it still to the altar to say,
Exactly.
what happened here?
And
What,
your word is just a mode of communication. It's neither kind nor.
Yeah, it's the energy behind it, behind how you use it. Yeah.
I think it's what's my
But it's-
default mechanism. In other words, what am I going to go to when I do this? When I get that? When you've got both voices there at the same time, what's my default? And it gives me an idea of where, and it's going to be natural then. When my default is that's the voice I want today, that's all I want all day, that's my default now. That's it. So whatever comes, that's my default. And so you come up and you say, well, that didn't feel good. Well, I must have forgotten my default. Well, I did this, and I would never do that.
Yeah,
but it felt right. It felt right. That's my default.
That's a beautiful example. I love it.
Thank you.
Because what I hear you saying is there was a thought there or a belief, an idea that nice people don't blow horns, but you kept getting that blown up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
3 times was the charm. You were
It-
like, okay, this is exposing this.
One of the most memorable things I know about my mother is one time she told me, never say never. And I was like maybe 8 or 9 years old, and I thought, okay. But, never say never, she said to me. She said it twice. I mean, there was 2 nevers in her telling me never to say never. And yet, I have used that so many times to de-escalate a situation where I wanted to be a little more belligerent than I was. Never say never, she said.
Those things we have in our lives, those things that make such an impression on us, they become part of our default. And we go to them without often even going through the mental process of realizing we're going through. Well, we better move on here to finish, because we're gonna skip the next one I was going to go to, but that's all right because we're covering most of the things here.
Where are we?
On 4?
Yes.
On 4?
Is that you or me?
That's you.
Me, okay, all right. Okay, I lose track. Okay. The first step toward freedom involves a sorting out of the false from the true. This is a process of separation in the constructive sense and reflects the true meaning of the apocalypse. Everyone will ultimately look upon his own creations and choose to preserve only what is good, just as God himself looked upon what he had created and knew that it was good. At this point, the mind can begin to look with love on its own creations because of their worthiness. At the same time, the mind will inevitably disown its miscreations, which without belief, will no longer exist.
Can we see how this is related to the apocalypse? Who's it an apocalypse for? Who looks upon this sorting out as apocalyptic?
We all should.
The ego.
The ego. It's apocalypse for the ego, this sorting out. And that's how the apocalypse has been misconstrued, to think that all of mankind should be wiped out.
Yeah, and then it just distorts the communication into some other
Exactly.
awful story.
As most of the religious documents have been distorted. Okay, and Teresa?
The term last judgment, all in caps, is frightening not only because it has been projected onto God, but also because of the association of last with death. This is an outstanding example of upside-down perception. If the meaning of the last judgment is objectively examined, it is quite apparent that it is really the doorway to life. No one who lives in fear is really alive. Your own last judgment cannot be directed towards yourself because you are not your own creation. You can, however, apply it meaningfully and at any time to everything you have made and retain in your memory only what is creative and good. This is what your right-mindedness cannot but dictate. The purpose of time is solely to give you time to achieve this judgment. It is your own perfect judgment of your own perfect creations. When everything you retain is lovable, there is no reason for fear to remain with you. This is your part in the atonement.
There's a ton of stuff in this paragraph.
You betcha.
It's just so absolutely loving, the whole thing,
Well, when
the
it
whole
says,
process.
no one who lives in fear is really alive. Wow.
Well, that's when Jesus said, right? Let the dead bury the dead.
Yes.
Everybody's like the walking dead. Let the dead bury the dead. Come with me. We have other things to attend to.
So if you just think about this in terms of loving thoughts and fearful or hateful thoughts, when you're in the process of one of those or the other, when do you feel alive?
Loving thoughts.
Yes.
And when do you feel that I might as well just die? It's pretty clear that what we made in fear has no life. And what we created in love is eternal. And the last judgment is retaining only what is eternal. Any thoughts on this section?
Well, the last sentence just says it as clearly as you just said it. When everything you retain is lovable, there is no reason for fear to remain with you.
So our lives have a purpose to experientially choose between love and fear and experientially understand why. and retain that understanding, in the sense that I keep going back to these where Course talks about behind each one of us is 1,000, and behind each one of those 1,000 more. We're not just doing this for ourselves. Or in the earlier example of the minds and the cells in a brain, for instance, we're not doing it just for ourselves, because behind each one is 1,000, and behind each one 1,000 more.
What?
I was just thinking about the day of the craft fair, where I was talking and sharing with people that I hadn't seen for a long time. And this one woman was telling me a story about when her brother died, and how I have shared, about the butterfly and how Jerry came back and everything. And she started telling me about her brother came back as the Red Robin. I won't go into the story, but she had tears in her eyes, and so did I, because it was such a beautiful story. And I know it's a story, but the love that she felt and and she kissed me on the cheek and she said, thank you for letting me share this story. And like I say, it wasn't the story, but it was the love and that we felt between each other that was so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And I had so many of those experiences.
It just occurred to me too when you were saying that, in the sharing of a story like that, you can have an ache in your heart, but if you share it turns into love. It's like that ache can turn into love, and after you've shared it, it's no longer the same story.
You want to mention briefly the woman at Costco today?
Oh, well, it was kind of interesting. This gal and I were just in the same spot in Costco. She was an elderly lady, and it was like our eyes met and we kind of knew each other, but we didn't really. But she just started talking and sharing and told me about her daughter, who she was from Colorado, and we kind of had that in common right away. She asked me right away where I grew up.
Out of the blue.
Out of the blue, just standing there. Where did you grow up? And I said, well, Utah and Colorado, and and then she started going into this story. Well, I'm from there, and so is my daughter, who died, but she came back to life. And I'm like, wow, I didn't say anything. I just looked at her, and so she explained the story where her daughter had a pet who went into this cave in Colorado, and there was a rabbit there, and the dog got the rabbit. Anyway, the rabbit had rabies, and as the daughter was trying to get the rabbit out of the dog, the rabbit bit the daughter, and the daughter got rabies, and she died in the hospital. But then she said she just came back to life, and they're both out here now, and she works for a Christian organization in where did I say where? I don't know.
I don't know if you told me that part of it.
I was just so, it's like, wow.
And you got chosen to.
Honored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thanked her for the story, and
She knew.
She thanked me, and she says it just made her feel good, Just she said meeting me made her feel good.
She knew you were safe to tell that to.
Maybe
You're
so.
not anybody, but most people she wouldn't have told. But.
Well, it was just lovely, and it was
Those are those gifts that we get that.
yeah, and it could be, maybe what I said earlier, maybe there was some kind of an ache in her heart, and after sharing that, it turned to love, and so now it's a story of love.
In the very principles of the miracles, principle number 7, it says, miracles are everyone's right, but purification is necessary first. So I went through here some time years ago looking for purification and what really purification is. Ultimately, it said purification is sharing. Nothing is real until it is shared. So now you had that sharing, and that's a purification, and it's a reality. Well, let's go to the workbook, page 455.
455.
Yes. Roger?
What is the last judgment? Christ's second coming gives the Son of God this gift. You hear the voice from God proclaiming that what is false, and what is true has never changed. And this, the judgment is in which perception ends. At first you see a world that is accepted this as true, projection from a now corrected mind. And with this holy sight, perception gives it silent blessing and then disappears, its goal accomplished and its mission done.
You see the significance of what it's saying when it says, at first you see a world that has accepted this as true, projected from a now corrected mind. What is that, the implication of that before we projected a world that is now corrected? What we saw before was a world of illusion that was also projected from our mind. The world is a projection of our mind. So it says, at first you see a world that has accepted this as true, projected from a now corrected mind, and with this holy sight, perception gives a silent blessing and then disappears, its goal accomplished and its mission done. So what is the goal and the mission of perception? It is to take every illusory world of separation and suffering and fear and hate and correcting it in perception to one of forgiveness.
That's not the goal of perception. Is the goal maybe a vision? That seems like a confusing. Perception is not really seen through the right mind.
Well, it's kind of like holy sight. Kind of like
Well,
holy sight is the highest form.
There's true perception, which is the same as forgiveness and the same as salvation. So you can use it that way. If you want to just go from the mind and use it as its goal, that'd be fine, I think.
Because it says, and this the judgment is in which perception ends.
It seems to me that true sight or holy, or it's called, the word you used here, holy sight, is the highest or true form of perception.
Well, you can read it as you choose. It says, and with this holy sight, perception gives a silent blessing and then disappears, its goal accomplished and its mission done. So however you want to read that.
Well, that makes sense to me. It's something about what you said that I didn't quite, wasn't adding up.
The Course
But I
personifies...
can't even repeat what you said.
Well,
knew it didn't
don't
seem
feel
like
bad.
you
I
added up.
probably can't either.
Go to the tape. Listen to the tape.
Well, let's not get too tangled up in it. The Course personifies a lot of things. It gives them a life of their own, in a way. It personifies the world in many cases. It's like it becomes a thing. So then it's a matter of what that purpose of that particular statement is about that. Any other questions on paragraph 1 there?
The final judgment on the world contains no condemnation, for it sees the world as totally forgiven, without sin and holy purposes. Without a cause and now without a function in Christ's sight, it merely slips away into nothingness. There it was born and there it ends as well. And all the figures in the dream in which the world began will go with it. Bodies now are useless and will therefore fade away because the Son of God is limitless.
Kind of goes along with the poem you read there, Brian. So here we are, looking at the Last Judgment. So here's, when we read this paragraph, why we can understand why it sounds apocalyptic to our egos. And if we didn't believe that our identities were greater than and more than the ego, it would be apocalyptic for us. And this would not be something that felt warm and fuzzy in reading this.
Apocalyptic for bodies.
Yeah.
For egos, yeah.
Even that is depending on how you look at it with mind, because the Course talks about bodies as I understand the Course, and at least I've chosen to believe it, is that bodies are like costumes in the play. You set them aside. They don't have to die. Someone else can come in and play this part of me and have this same name. But free will in the illusion allows it to be different here and different there and different. And when does it not become the part of me anymore? Well, I could as easily ask, when has it ever been the part of me? When did I ever own this part? Is this who I am? Or is it just an experience in a dream? And my reality is there, waiting for this aspect of mine to return.
Well, that goes along with the idea that it's all play. You know,
Absolutely.
There's different scenes, different costumes. Different...
So can only one person play Hamlet? Can only one fragment of mind can do it?
Laurence Olivier or John Gilbert.
And does each one seem to make the part their own?
Yep.
Who plays it?
We were talking earlier about walk-ins. I wonder if this is the same thought.
I think so. I think it is. I think that's appropriate. Patty and I met a woman who was in Utah. She acted in a few TV series and stuff, I think, but she was also very spiritual, and we learned Reiki from her, actually. But it was their daughter, wasn't it, that was hit by a car and flew like 20 feet in the air, and strangely enough was not hurt. But it was no longer their daughter. And they were into, I think, more into the Buddhist tradition.
Yeah.
But she found apparently someone who was very deep into understanding of the whole illusion and everything else. And she got a hold of this person, and this person came to the daughter, and through some process, which in the Catholic religion would probably be called an exorcism, through some process, had this entity leave. And apparently while it was Joan, while she was and her husband were still there, and the daughter, apparently her face just changed. And the guy who did it said, he challenged me before the spirit left. And her daughter was back and fine and remembered everything. So what's preventing this type of thing to be understood and accepted, in acceptance? What's preventing that? Modern science. It's impossible. It's some figment of their imagination. Yes, and so are you, and so am I.
If you can't weigh it and measure it, it doesn't exist.
Right.
That's science.
That's so
If you can't
interesting.
weigh it
I
and
just
measure
find
it, it doesn't exist.
it's so incredibly unscientific.
Yes.
To look at life that way is what is so interesting, because scientists by nature I mean, when you sit and talk to a really real scientist, they will really pick apart their own, theories and to see if there's really truth there. You know, they're really looking for the truth, but it's so obvious that existence always was, always has been, will always be, whether science is here or not. So it doesn't matter. Science just can show you a little bit, but it's not going to show you anything close to all of it. So
I read something on science you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Just the other day about the problem with science is that they start with a hypothesis that they want to either prove or disprove.
Scientific method.
So they started out in limitation.
Yeah.
And it either becomes true or false. And then there are degrees or percentages. They have no open-ended questions at all. They always start with a hypothesis. They always start within what seems to be possible, instead of allowing for what doesn't seem to be possible. And so they're always trapped in their own scientific experience.
So, it's probabilistic, so it never reaches certainty.
Exactly.
Well, if all they see is form, they're missing like 9/10 of creation. Really. And they're really stuck in form. Most scientists are just all about, if you can't weigh it and measure it, it does not exist.
Well, quantum physics is changing all of that, fortunately.
Yes.
And I
Quantum
think
physics
the
is.
younger generations are accepting that. I think because of the one mind. They're coming in with that opening, that openness. So I think
the very laws of nature are not material. And yet the science believes the laws exist. The laws govern, but are not. They govern materiality in science, but the laws themselves are not material.
I think the laws of materiality are not laws either. We're just limiting them because we won't allow them to change. We won't allow the laws of nature to change in our minds because we don't need to go there. We better finish this.
Well, don't
get tough.
But it's fun anyway.
I think instead of laws, let's call them instructions.
Okay, where are we at?
3,
I think.
3.
Did we do 2?
3. Yeah, we did 2.
Okay, 3.
You who believe that God's last judgment would condemn the world to hell along with you, accept this holy truth. God's judgment is the gift of the correction He bestowed on all your errors, freeing you from them and all the effects they ever seem to have. To fear God's grace, saving grace, is but to fear complete release from suffering. Return to peace, security, and happiness, and union with your own identity.
Isn't that crazy?
So God's judgment is the gift of correction, and ours is the deciding what voice to listen to. Any questions on that paragraph? 4?
God's final judgment is as merciful as every step in His appointed plan to bless His Son and call him to return to the eternal peace He shares with Him. Be not afraid of love, for it alone can heal all sorrow, wipe away all tears, and gently waken from his dream of pain the Son whom God acknowledges as His. Be not afraid of this. Salvation asks you give it welcome, and the world awaits your glad acceptance, which will set it free.
Of course, talks often about the fear of God and the fear of salvation. And I think for some people new into the course will say, well, that doesn't make sense. How could you fear God? What would be... Well, the biblical God is a fearful God. In the Old Testament, it's a God of vengeance.
Yeah.
I will strike you dead if you don't do this or you don't do that type of thing.
It
Smite my enemies, you know.
It presumes you're guilty.
Pardon?
It presumes you're guilty.
Well, it does, yeah.
You're full of sin.
Yeah.
You know, Denny, he's got a Jewish background. He says that the word that's been translated as fear actually means awe. A-W-E.
Yeah.
Well, that makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah. There have been a lot of words that could be, just like we have a lot of words that have 2 or 3 different definitions in the dictionary.
Yeah.
Somebody chose one.
Yeah.
A fearful person.
Yeah. Right.
I always liked watching the old westerns. Are you a God-fearing man? Scared to death. Okay, 5.
This is God's final judgment. You are still my holy son, forever innocent, forever loving, and forever loved, as limitless as your creator, and completely changeless and forever pure. Therefore, awaken and return to me. I am your father, and you are my son.
Forever innocent, forever loving, and forever loved, as limitless as your creator, and completely changeless and forever pure. And therefore awaken. It's a dream where we are. Therefore awaken and return to me. I am your father, and you are my son, and I did not create myself. We could go to a couple other places, but I don't want to jam it in here. Let's just read the first lesson on the next page.
3:11?
Yes.
I judge all things as I would have them be. Judgment was made to be a weapon used against the truth. It separates what it is being used against and sets it off as if it were a thing apart. And then it makes of it what you would have it be. It judges what it cannot understand because it cannot see totality and therefore judges falsely. Let us not use it today, but make a gift of it to him who has a different use for it. He will relieve us of the agony of all the judgments we have made against ourselves and reestablish peace of mind by giving us God's judgment of his Son. Want me to read the other?
Sure.
Father, we wait with you with open mind today to hear your judgment of the Son you love. We do not know him, we cannot judge, and so we let your love decide what he whom you created as your Son must be.
One of the things that works the best for me is seeing everything as love or a call for love.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think you're being attacked, but you change it to that it's a call for love, it's not attacking, that changes the complete frame of reference.
That's the beautiful default position. That would be nice if we could just automatically go there.
Right.
I read about that in a book, and a guy in New York City, a guy came up to this fellow and said, "Give me all your money." Put a gun in his back. He said, "Okay, here's all my money, but if you take me over to that bank there, I'll get some more for you." And the guy thought, "You're crazy," but they went over there. He says, "How much do you need?" And the guy says, "I need $300 or I'm going to lose my house." So he got him out $300. And then the guy said, "I need to know your name because somehow, some way, I can't do it now, but I will repay you." And I thought, oh, what a heartwarming story that is. And apparently, according to this book, it was a true story that happened to this guy in New York City.
Wow.
And I thought, wow.
You know, isn't that nice to have that default position? Because that's, Nicole, as you were saying, right in the moment of when things are going wrong, then what? Then what? To be able to do that requires having that default position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what all the practice is for.
Right.
And
So hopefully it's coming through
Right.
when we're,
Yeah.
If you're already
Breathe.
saying I want a loving day, then you're seeing everything as love or a call for love. You know, you're not saying.
And then it boils down to faith and trust. To have faith in what you asked for that day, that will be given you.
Right.
Somehow, some way, that will be given you.
Right.
It's this, a happy outcome to all things is sure lesson that is in it. Don't know how it's going to happen, but that's what I asked for, and that's what I'm told I get. Or along with the lesson, you are entitled to miracles. We're entitled to them. We've used that one in situations, in health situations and stuff. And it's worked. So it's the idea of, in the heat of it, I have to still go through a process most of the time. But the thing about it, when I remember to ask for that, what kind of day do you want? In chapter 30, the rules of decision, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
So, first decide what kind of day you want. And then it says, this is the day that will be given. But it says, if I make no decisions by myself, this is the day that will be given me. And then your trust in that, and take that with you. There's also like a most benevolent outcome thing. I asked for a most benevolent outcome day. Well, how's this going to work out? How's that going to be the most benevolent outcome? I don't know. I mentioned a couple of times how I like from the people on Pathways of Light, Robert and Mary Stolting, how they were involved in something, and I don't know if it was Robert or Mary said, I can't wait to see how this turns out for the best. Because it was all screwed up. But to then go to that default position, and now your whole mind has changed, and now that's what you're looking for. How is this going to turn out for the best? It must be here somewhere. It becomes a seek and you will find here somewhere.
Well, and also that guidance piece that you mentioned earlier, Tom, it's like when we start out, even if we go even a little bit more radical from the kind of day I want to, coming back to the saying of, to the Holy Spirit, of where would you have me go? What would you have me do today? What would you have me say today, and to whom, Holy Spirit? Now my day is completely devoted to you. Come what may, whatever form it shows up in. What would you have me do? And knowing, trusting that it's unfolding how it's supposed to.
Yeah.
And also help it be obvious. Help it be obvious to me, and I think what always gets me in looking at the Last Judgment thing with the Course in Miracles, is the first time I ever read this was just, wow, realizing, this whole Last Judgment idea has absolutely nothing to do with God.
Yeah.
That it has everything to do with me, and that the whole world's been projecting it all onto God. But the very moment judgment ceases here, there's heaven. It's like that quick.
It's not.
It's like, wow, that's what it takes. That's what's necessary.
It's not what
the last
happens.
judgment.
It's not what happens being good or bad. It's your thoughts about it. We can think that it's, this is good or this is bad. It's neither. That's what a lot of teachers talk about, duality. Whenever we get into dual mode, there's going to be nothing but unhappiness, because it's your thoughts about whatever happens. It's not good, it's not bad, it just is. So we can't say, I want this kind of a day, I want that kind of a day, I don't want this, I don't want that. That's discrimination. That is saying, wanting and fearing are two opposites, but that's where we get into trouble. Because when we want something a certain way, we're going to be disappointed. That's expectations that can't be met. So again, good, bad, we don't want to go there, I don't think, because even in the Course it says it's not what happens, it's your thoughts about it.
Well, I think for me personally, there are things that I don't need to go through my life or another life or a life after that seeing images in person or on television of suffering and starvation and war and grief. And so I think we can ask for joy, and we can ask for peace, and we can ask for... I don't want to try to reinterpret that as some loving God that just saying, well, you got to get through this. In a sense, it can be that way. But what it boils down to more for me is what God is not. I don't need to concentrate on what God is not. There's a paragraph in here in chapter 18. Love is not learned. Its meaning lies within itself. And learning ends when you have recognized all it is not. This is what we're doing now. So I don't have to look at what love is not and say, it must be God's will. No, that's the idea of separation in my mind, and that's what's going to change totally when within my mind, my will is aligned with God, and that world is forgiven, and the whole world changes. It literally does, because that's what I want to see. I don't know how to do it by asking for specifics. I agree with that, because then I'm going to think I'm making this. It's to say, no, the difference is, who am I? Because as Nicole was saying about, well, we will be told where to go, what to say, what to do. Well, that's personally insulting to my ego. It has been all along. What do you need me for? You're just calling me a robot? What, When it changes, when that changes is, wait a minute. What am I? Am I this thing that thinks it made itself, that's personally insulted? Is that who I am? Or this thing I'm asking, is it really that which I am that can tell me where to go, what to say, what to do? I am that. I am not this. If I can go to that place in my mind, there's nothing insulting about it. Then it is escape from the dream. But and it all boils down to what I think I am and what I think I want. And then all the details will take care of themselves. And I don't need to see a carnage. I need to see the battleground go away, because it's not real, because I don't need it. Because I want to play with other aspects of mind that are at this level.
So like any good actor, we have created the role. We have created the character, but we have not created ourselves.
We've made our version of the character.
Yeah.
The play was already there with all the characters' potential,
That's right.
with all the costumes. And the changing costumes, we change the costume every day. Every night we go to sleep, every day we wake up in a different body. It's not exactly the same. Otherwise we'd still be just like we were when we were conceived in a womb. We change constantly. We rewrite and recharacter ourselves constantly with a new costume.
Who's the we that's changing?
Our ego selves, our illusory selves.
Exactly. So if we can let go of those thoughts, that's when we wake up, because we're thinking a different person every day, but that's not who we are.
Yeah, the entity looking out of your eyes is not ever changed. It's the same
Right.
when you were born as it is now. That changes a bit.
And then the course is the Holy Spirit is within us. The Holy Spirit isn't something else.
Yeah.
It's integral to ourselves.
So who's looking? Who's
That's so.
Yeah.
Who do we turn to? We turn to ourselves, in a sense, and our real spiritual self, and that's the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
So that's the.
Of course, he says the Holy Spirit is the only reality within us.
Yeah.
Because it represents ourself with the capital S.
There you go.
What you said about the world
How do you-
can quite literally change. The world.
Thank you.
It's all present in real
I experienced that one time. I mean, and it was like a matter of a second. But it was just incredible.
I'll bet.
And beyond a shadow of a doubt. But there's something, that was a few years back. But when I was in my 20s, because what you said reminded me of this very much, that when I was in my 20s and first studying the course, and I had, I don't know how many of these books. I almost rewrote the whole thing in notes, just because everything had so much meaning, for me reading it. And I worked in this little shop that allowed me a lot of time to be with the book because there weren't very many customers there. I had 3 jobs, that was one of them. And then the other one, it was a night nurse at a 6th grade camp. And I had a room and a shower and all that. So I'd be up all night because that was my job. I don't know how I kept working the next day, but somehow I did. So I'd be up with the course then too. But there was something that was really gnawing at me that I took to Jesus one day when I was in that little shop there by myself. And how did you heal the lepers? How did you do it? How did you look at them and see them? And they were just, some of the stories are like they were just healed, And I was so deeply asking, I wanted it so bad. And I felt him. And it was like he just came over me and he just said, and I was telling him, I want to see how you see. How did you do it? He said, when you see how I see, you won't see leprosy.
Yeah. That's right.
And I knew, and I just cried. I just sat there and cried and cried and cried, and I just went, like, it does not exist.
Right.
Period.
That reminds me of what Tom said.
Just doesn't exist.
Before the crucifixion, when he met with the Pharisees, he didn't see, he just saw wholeness.
Not one of them was any different than himself.
No, right, exactly.
And I knew that's why they healed in his presence. It just was not there. It couldn't exist.
And we've gone over, I could go to a place in here too. In fact, you might want to go to it on page 444 in the text that talks about the world changing in front of your eyes. Okay, everyone, we'll see everybody next week.
Can I end this with a poem?
Sure.
About judgment? This was inspired by something Tom Carpenter said in here a few years ago. Here come the judge, here come the judge. From his position he will not budge. Defend, defend, he roars and he bellows as he cries out against all of his fellows. Filled with arrogance and righteous bluster, with all the rage that he can muster. Defendant, give me your plea, for I am busy, can't you see? Guilty, says he as he bangs down his hammer. You are hereby sentenced to life in this glamour. For justice must be done if I am to have any more fun. But my safety lies in being defenseless, in spite of the judge's harsh intenseness. The judge is the ego, and he never lets up. For criticism and blame are what fills his cup. And he can only be ousted from his position by bringing forgiveness to its fruition.